So, and to introduce the subject, this is something that we're, as a group, we're very concerned about, because we have national targets for tackling climate change, and in order to get anywhere near them, we have to do a lot of work on our housing stock, which is generally, compared to many other countries, very poorly insulated at the moment, especially the older stock. Making a start by homeowners making a start themselves is part of it, because heating of houses is a considerable part of our carbon emissions nationally. So we need to make an impact. So we're going to hear today from two families who have already done quite a lot of work on their own homes, and hopefully have lots of questions and discussion afterwards. So they'll speak each for 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, with visuals that you'll be able to see, and then we'll go into questions. So let's start with Suzie Webb, who has a house in Cambridge, and she'll tell you all about what she's done to it, and she and her husband, Ian.
Not sharing yet.
Can you start the slideshow?
Yeah, it's just catching up, I think. Okay.
Click on that and view slideshow, is that?
I just can't get to it.
Okay.
Over here. Cool. Sorry.
Thanks very much, Peter. You got there. Even to you, even to everyone over there. So I'm Suzie Webb. I'm passionate about insulation. I've loved everything I've ever done to improve the footprint of any house I've ever lived in, or anyone else ever lived in. So much so that last year I sat in the road with Insulate Britain, and I may or may not be getting a criminal record at some point for that. But hopefully that has helped raise the issue of insulation nationally, and will help prevent the 8,500 deaths a year from fuel poverty in the future. It's made the situation so legislation's ready to roll, hopefully soon. So this is our house. It's a 1950s ex-council house. We bought it about 15 years ago. We chose it because it had a large lounge, so we could, because we knew we wanted to socialise in it. It had double glazing. Turns out it had metal baked bean tins, roughly speaking, around the outside of the window. It's rubbish double glazing. Never mind. We thought it had a south-facing roof, so we could put solar panels on it. Turns out that was south-east facing, which is better in my opinion now. And we like the size and location. So the top photo is roughly how it looked when we moved in, and the bottom photo is roughly how it looks now. And our aims for retrofitting our home were to make it warm and comfortable and beautiful, and that it would fit with our deep green ethics. My husband isn't here tonight, he's looking after our 6-year-old and our 12-year-old, but it's very much been a joint project. My clicky things stopped working, so Peter's turning into my clicky thing. Okay. Or should I start doing? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to talk about insulation, how we heat our house. It's with wood, so we'll talk more about firewood, processing that, what we do for transport, how the electricity in our home, luxuries we've included and our sort of thoughts around time and money of the work we've done. Then I'll have a pause for questions, and then I'll go on to talking about the decor and the floors, white goods we've bought, thinking about the curtains and windows. We had an architect visit once. We do tours with Open Eco Homes, and she said, oh, so you're a model in curtains. You're an excellent model for curtains. I was like, oh, okay, well, you've got to be good at something. I'm good at curtains, because originally we had these particularly bad, what they called bad windows. Most of them are retrofitted now. Talk about laundry ventilation, what we do to reduce our water use, things we've done in the garden, how we feel about our achievements, what our dreams are for the future, and space for more questions. So insulation. Insulation is the really boring, really key bit of any retrofit. Like, you know, you can have all the eco bling you want, and we have got some, but the insulation is key. The cheapest bit of insulation I've ever done is we have between a room we don't heat, called the garden room, and the kitchen, there's glass door and a big keyhole, and I've stuffed that with tissue, and that's my cheapest ever piece of insulation. So now it's a large draft drives in. We have cavity walls. So we have these bricks where you have all the long bricks that I've just been taught called stretcher bonds, and this hole here means that you probably can't see, but the 50p piece of concrete on those bricks means that the cavity has been filled. We did that very early on in the project, and it was really like, it was on a cold October day, it was like having a duvet wrapped around the house. I sat in the house as it happened, and you could really feel the effect of it going around. When we moved in, there was kind of 15 odd centimetres of what I call yellow itchy in the roof, and then we added another 15 centimetres of sheep's wool thermofleece insulation. So it's a really pleasant atmosphere to be in. Now you don't notice the yellow itchy underneath, and it's warm. And I also, the back of the back of the loft hatch, I attached a bin bag with thermofleece inside it initially, and then a sheet with drawing pins, and that insulated the back of the loft hatch. Cheap and simple. We've lagged pipes various places around the house. That took me about £5 and 20 minutes to get that done in the places that were exposed. And this bottom picture of a draft strip on a door is a kind of, I put it in there to remind myself about the worst piece of insulation I've ever done, the only piece of work on my house that I haven't been happy while it happened. And that was because I chose the wrong moment. So I had a very little newborn baby, can't remember how old, and it took me the whole weekend to drill in 10 screws, one on each side of the door. My husband's going, this isn't the right time. I'm like, I'm doing it anyway, let's go. And I did it, but it's a real mission in choosing which jobs you do when. However, it is still working 12 years later. It's a brilliant piece of insulation. It really stops the draft flowing in from when the front door's open. The bath is a favourite piece of insulation in that I pulled the side off the bath panel and shoved things like old duvets and coats and pillows under there. I've been told that bubble wrap would be an inert thing. That means there's not going to be any bugs growing. My mistake was that I did it multiple times, pulling the bath side off, broke the bath side, and I have now fitted a nice wooden painted thing down the side instead. So my advice is to fill a bath with insulation, which means you get a really long hot soak in the bath, is you need about the same amount as would fill your bath to go around the side of it. So you get that volume of stuff, take the bath side off once, shove it all under, and then put the bath side back on, and you've got long soaks for years. I'm going to talk a little bit more about sinks and insulation I've done under sinks later. If we can move on. So heating. We now don't have a gas bill. What we did instead is we installed the 3 solar thermal panels you can see on the roof. For anyone that doesn't know, solar thermal basically means solar panels with water in. So we installed those 3, And we also fitted this stove where there was previously a gas fire. We pulled that out and put in a stove with back boilers, which means there's a water jacket around the back of the stove and over the roof of the stove. And that flows into the old pipes and the old radiators and into this big tank that you can see in the bottom right. And that tank holds about 300 litres of water, which is a lot. And it's got different coils that go through it. So one goes through from the solar panels, one goes through from the stove, and then there's an electric coil that just heats the top half of the tank if we need an override switch, which we use a little bit in spring and autumn. But the rest of the year, the sun and wood give us all our hot water and all our heat. Great, so that's roughly how we heat our house. So firewood is obviously necessary for that. The bottom left picture is a method I like, where you, instead of splitting one log at a time and they kind of fall off the block and you pick them up and you try again, you have another bash and then fall off the block. You get a lot of logs and you put them inside a tyre, that's in a bike tyre. I've also done it with bungee cord. And you just whack them and whack them and whack them until most of them seem split. And then you take, if you're lucky, you take the tyre off and drop it straight into a wheelbarrow. So you split a lot of logs much more quickly than normal. And in the top right, there's my husband and his chainsaw equipment. And he's splitting it on a thing called a logster. So again, instead of cutting one log at a time, that contraption holds a lot of, 6-8 feet lengths of wood, and you can cut them all through at once. And originally we used to take the sawdust, you can see by his feet, and go, what are we doing with all this? And it was like a waste product. We didn't know what to do with it. And we farm it off to our friend who's really good at composting. And then we learned the art of putting sawdust into a paper bag and then putting it in the stove, a stove that's already lit, not a kind of starting up stove. Put it in the stove and it keeps burning like another log. The paper bag is essential, if you chuck it in with just a spade or something, then it feels like putting a blanket on the fire. Yeah, so sawdust in paper bags, I love it. And let's move on. So wood, this, the bottom right picture shows part of our wood pile, and that's storing wood for next winter, and some of it will be for the winter afterwards. The wood that's for this winter is in the top right picture. We burn about 6 cubic meters of wood a winter, and we've also, so that outside concrete shed, we also turned into a bike store. So we widened the doors, we put in metal bike hoops with hempcrete, and that means that it's now a bike store and a wood store, working quite harmoniously together, really. Obviously, you need to keep decluttering it, like anywhere in any home. Transport, we're into bikes and car sharing. I last flew in 2005, I think it was. And thinking about 2018, I stopped celebrating. If you told me you're going to Corfu this summer, I might say something like, I hope you enjoy your last flight. However, if you told me you're going to Corfu because your grandma lives there, I'll be like, oh, lovely, I hope you have a really good time. I think love miles are important. Holidays, I like Wales and Norfolk. And I hope to get to Italy one day by train. That's where I'm at with transport. Let's move on. I've also got a car. That's feels like a necessity at the moment, but it's obviously a luxury. Electricity. So you saw the 3 solar panels on the roof earlier that are thermal ones, and now after that we fitted 10 photovoltaic panels that make electricity, and they feed into the grid. And we have our energy comes from Good Energy. They're one of the suppliers that only supply what's it called, renewable energy. Yeah, Ecotricity is another one. If you don't do anything else, switch to someone that's just supplying renewables, electricity from renewables. And those 3 beautiful children are some of the ones I look after. Okay, move on. Okay, so luxuries, time and money. The skylight that you can see my older, when she was younger, daughter looking in is what I call a luxury. We refitted, we insulated our back garden room and replaced the windows because they were holding up the roof and they were rotting and it was just a mess. So, and the skylight was a luxury. And it puts more light into the kitchen. We've also, you see that above the sink, the draining racks, that's where all those cups and glasses and plates and lids live. They haven't got another home, that's their only home. So I'm saving time and energy every time I wash up, just gets stacked up there, lives up there. The cutlery lives on the draining board and the Tetra Pak has to go in the cupboard underneath the draining board. Another thing you can see in that picture is the kitchen sink. I've wrapped with 2 layers of bubble wrap and some duct tape so that the water in the sink stays hotter. It's not conducted out because it's an electric sink. Yeah. And in the house, we have mainly second-hand furniture, the odd new bit here and there. And one of those things that makes me feel really uncomfortable when I do these talks is people might talk about payback, like how long before you get paid back for your house? Well, how long till you get paid back for your car or your new kitchen or the last cup of tea you bought? You know, there's no questions about payback on those. They're just things that you kind of expect to wear out eventually. And so I haven't looked too carefully at the payback on any of the things I've done. I've just felt like it was the right thing to do in our situation. And I'd love to hear any questions from you guys in the room or the people I can't see on the screen. Celia.
Well, wood burning.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about wood burning? Because that's recently become less ideal for people who want to stop global warming.
Yeah.
So, yes, tell us a bit more about that.
So I've got various points on this. I definitely don't want to be involved with burning any fossil fuels. So I don't want to have gas and I don't want to have coal and I don't want to have oil being made into electricity. And nuclear power has somehow been greenwashed into being acceptable. It's not acceptable or tolerable in any way for me. So at that point, I'm kind of like, well, what's left? You've got renewable energy and you've got wood, and I can't see many other options. And wood is polluting on a kind of small local scale. There's particulates going into the atmosphere. And it's not necessarily great for your neighbour's lungs, is an argument. So I am not here to promote it for everyone necessarily, but I also haven't heard of a better thing if you can't do pure renewables. What I would say about the wood that we burn is my husband works for conservation charity, and so all the wood we burn has come from within 30 miles and is been cut down, would either have been burnt on the site, because otherwise it's releasing methane, and it's better if it's burnt as carbon dioxide as I understand it. So it's better if it's burnt in our house than on the site as rubbish, is the way I would look at that. I don't support open fires because their efficiency is so much less than stoves. So most, I can't remember my figures, it's roughly like 10-20% of heat goes into a room for an open fire, and 70, 80, 90 goes in from a stove. So yeah, open fires I'm not into. Importing wood I'm not into. Locally supplied wood on a kind of a cycle that's on the top of the earth rather than digging down into the bottom of the earth. Does that answer your question? That's where I stand on it. Obviously, when we installed this was 15 odd years ago, so the politics was different.
It was,
but I wouldn't necessarily do anything different if I did it now.
No, I understand, because it's a choice, isn't it?
Yeah.
And electricity is a lot lower carbon today than 15 years ago as well. So the balance of the decisions of electric heating options and heat pumps. Yeah,
heat pumps are brilliant. Yeah, you know, they're 75% efficient. I don't know. Yeah.
And they're not, they're 3 efficient. You get 3 times the amount of the energy.
But you'd still have to take like a quarter of your energy from the grid.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So that's what I mean by my
Yeah,
75%, yeah.
Going the other way.
David? David Bush has got his hand up for a question.
Yeah, you should be able to unmute and go for it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do so. I must have done it by accident.
Oh,
Okay.
no worries.
If anyone else has any questions, otherwise I'll just carry on, and we can have some more at the end if anyone's got anything they want to ask.
Or if you wanted to put a question in the chat, we can pick it up that way.
Yeah, if we check the chat to see there's nothing there. Okay, great. If we can go back to the slides, they help jog my tiny brain. Okay.
Oh, I need to screen share again. So,
do you recommend a company for insulating the attic? Me and my husband did a very good job on insulating our attic. Yeah, the only thing we haven't perfected is we've got slight slopes in the corners of our rooms. So the rooms like that, and then slopes in the corners, and that's something that could be perfected in our house. Other than that, it depends what, I mean, there were grants around, but I recently did my mum's attic with my brother, and that was like, oh, I don't know, £200, something like that. So no, I haven't got recommendations, sorry. Yeah.
If you're insulating attics,
yeah,
there's, as well as using fleece, you can use, if you want to use it as board, if you want to board the attic, you can actually buy insulated cut panel, and that fits on the thing, and they are actually set with 9 inches. Sorry, I'm not metric.
Yeah, no,
of insulation on the back, and you can buy, if you've already got the 4 inches up to the top of the old rafters, you can buy from B&Q raisers, so you can put them in, raise the whole floor, and put it to the new standards.
great, yeah.
The other way of doing it is to use reflective. One of the extra things that can be done is under the eaves, you can use reflective insulation that reflects the heat coming through back down into the main room, particularly if you're doing that, and you can get, again, low emission panels that can just be pushed into most houses have standard gaps between the eave pieces, and you can buy pre-cut pieces that are about 4 feet long and about, well, that's wide, 18 inches wide, and they'll just push in, and just a simple tab of wood, because they've got no mass, will hold them in place. Or if you want to make it look nice, then you cover it with thin board and paper and make them painted, and you have a room.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. You remind me of my last trip to B&Q. If you go for a little wander around any of those big department stores, they've got some lovely insulation products to work with and have a browse out, aren't they? Pretty much for what to do. Thank you.
And B&Q are particularly helpful because they do how to do it. And never forget YouTube.
Yeah. Can we move on, please?
Yeah, there was one other question in the chat that's quite relevant to you. It's just about, do you have radiators that are working with the stove for heating rooms, or is it all coming from the stove?
Yeah, so sorry I didn't explain that so well. Yeah, basically the water goes into that big tank, and then when the tank gets hot enough, it goes out into any radiators that are turned on, and they're just normal radiators with thermostats. Yeah, we don't heat the back room, partly because the radiator's broken, but we just sort of figured that not using it for 3 or 4 months a year, except for sort of doing the washing out there, is all right. Yeah.
But it's a normal kind of central heating system with a pump and a thermostat?
I suppose so.
I mean, you said it kind of, when the tank's hot, the water goes round. Is there a pump that sends it around?
Yeah, there must be. My brain isn't answering that question at the moment. I don't know.
A controller with a timer?
No. So it comes on when the stove comes on. So if the stove's on, then the water starts going into, if the stove's on and gets hot enough to start heating the water and making the system circulate, then it goes into the radiators. So compared to your house, we may well have quite a big fluctuation in temperatures depending on who's stoking the fire and whether or not we can be bothered to do it that evening. We just go upstairs because it's a bit warmer because the heat's gone upstairs during the day, or yeah.
But presumably the kitchen was so the kitchen stove is in.
Yeah.
That's really warm the whole time. So.
Oh no, the stove's in the living room.
The living room.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, I'll show you a bit more about how we keep the living room warm in a minute. Yeah.
So is it gravity feed? Excuse me.
I think so.
Well, okay.
Haven't got any clear answers in my head about this bit of circulation at the moment. I'll carry on with the bits I remember. So decor and floors. We've now, I think last summer, stripped the final bit of wallpaper from our walls. So we've gone for kind of plaster throughout, and we're aiming for a system that involves painting magnolia every now and again on the walls and painting the skirting boards and door frames and things white. And that means that we haven't got 17 half-finished cans of paint in primrose yellow and dusky pink and whatever else lying in the shed. We've just got the next bucket of magnolia that you keep on rolling around the house. We've got a lot less carpet than we have. I don't feel very comfortable out carpet. Basically, it's going to go in landfill in about 10 years in my house. So we stripped that the floor at the top of the landing and took out the carpet there. Might put a carpet back in my daughter's room, maybe. I kind of like that when being snug and warm. But on the whole, we've gone for strip floors. The small sort of close-up floor picture, on the left is a cork floor and on the right is laminate. Now the laminate was fitted at the end of decorating the whole living room, probably putting the stove in. I was running out of energy. I just went to the shop and bought the cheap laminate. I didn't even buy the waterproof laminate. And underneath I put one skingy layer of bubble wrap, and if I'd been thinking more clearly I would have at least put 2 layers of bubble wrap under it, because it was like, you know, £20 or something, but I wasn't thinking clearly. I was tired. So the laminate floor is pretty rubbish. It's straight on top of a slab of concrete. It's not a good aspect of my house. A visiting architect said that the cork was the best solution for my house, so 1/2 inch of cork. I'm loving the cork floor from a feel point of view. The kids roll around on it. It's all comfortable. You can sit on it through the middle of winter pretty much, and you feel comfortable. The only downside is that it's chipping, and I did know at the time that we should put 3 coats of varnish on it, and we didn't do that, and we then played some pretty rough games on it and chipped the cork. So I guess in my fantasies, sometime in decades to come, we fit more cork and we varnish it, and that would be the best solution I can see for our concrete floor. So white goods. Before I lived in our house, we lived in a narrowboat on the Cam, and we didn't have any fridge. And what we did eventually invent is this Zier pot in pot fridge there. The kind of, it's 2 clay pots with sand in the middle and water in the bottom that evaporates off. If you want to find out more about that, I refer you to Permaculture Magazine issue 80, where wrote an article about it. We ditched our dinosaur hob, and when I became a childminder, bought a fridge freezer and this new cooker, and they use about the same amount of electricity as our own old cooker do. So we kind of ended up about even on that. Should we move on? And curtains and windows. So the big pink curtains that you can see in that picture in the lounge separate the lounge in half, so we can heat one end of the lounge where the stove is, keep really warm in there. They're triple layer of curtain. When I first hung them, I hung them with the red velvet side facing into the lounge, knowing I didn't want it and didn't trust my instinct. I didn't follow that, and eventually had to rehang them. So just follow what your gut says and trust yourself that you don't want red curtains in your lounge. If you don't, I love them at the other end of the lounge. And ideas can take a long time to evolve. So that on the right hand picture, you can see the curtain has got a wire along the bottom. That's a normal wire that you use on net curtains. And I thought I was going to be putting a shelf so that the heat from the radiator didn't go up behind the curtains. I thought I was going to put a shelf there. It never kind of wanted to be built, that shelf. And eventually I went, the wire means I can tuck the curtain behind, and the heat comes back into the room, not out of the window. We've got a combination of metal windows still at the far end of that lounge, wood in most of the house, and we bought PVC for the garden room. In my fantasies, we afforded hardwood. In reality, we afforded softwood, but it is lasting really well. Think about drying when you're designing your spaces. The bottom right picture shows a pulley area that goes into the a wasted space above our staircase. And then we also have another pulley area and a plastic covered outside corridor. The clothes horses I kind of hoof in and out because my washing, I like to get a bit of fresh air through it. And we've blocked the brick ventilation holes up. So we do get some mold, we do use a dehumidifier a bit. We're not a perfect model for ventilation in our home. Oh, and when I bought our washing machine, if you're ever thinking you might get solar thermal panels or be heating your own water in your house, then buy a hot and cold fill washing machine, because otherwise you're not going to be able to use the hot water you're making yourself in your home. I really like EBAC's one. Water use reduction. So we had this left-hand sink in the bathroom, and because I childmined, I wanted a mixer tap because kids were getting really too hot hands sometimes. So I fitted a mixer tap, and at the bottom, behind the new white sink, you can see pipes with what are called isolation valves on. And I learned from that you can kind of twist the thing to see how much water comes up through your pipes. So my cold water flows out quite slowly and my hot water comes out a bit quicker, because that means that it gets to the tap sort of quick enough. But it's a way of, like, you know, when the cold tap's on, you can moderate how much water is being used by just twisting those. You haven't got to come with the standard fitting. And we bought a dual flush toilet. So it's now flushing either 3 litres or 5 litres, but I believe there were 1 litre flushes on the market. I just couldn't find it when I bought that in a hurry because the old one had broken. Oh, and so when we moved into the house, we made a 10-year plan of what we were going to do, and we got to 15 years later and we finally installed our compost toilet in lockdown. We've got an outside toilet room that had been a dumping ground shed for years. Left-hand picture, my husband's got the privilege of smashing the old toilet. And then this is our compost toilet. And it's made by Strumpet and Trollope, who we recommend. And it could be just put inside. It would be a bit smellier than the average toilet. So it's separating out urine and compost feces with a bit of sawdust on top. And we've got a wheelie bin of feces accumulating, and the wee goes on trees and compost heaps and so on. Seems to be working. Garden, we've done various things. I'm aware of time. We have all the main features of wildlife going on in the garden. And so what have we achieved? 10 to 15 years it's been. We've got a snug home, we're off gas, we pay about £50 a month for water and electric. We have the privilege of a log pile and all the variations and work and sweat, and every log is different. That brings, we spent about £46,000, but I you know, it's not like if I hadn't spent it on the house, I'd know where that money was. It's just kind of come through. I guess some of it must have had a lump at some point from somewhere. Yeah, we inherited a bit from my aunt at one point, so that some of that went into the house, some of it went into the mortgage. But yeah, we feel close to nature. And I guess the main thing for me is like self-respect. I could have done other things with my time and money, but if I'd said, well, you know, the climate crisis is going on and I just sat there and turned the gas up, that wouldn't have felt all right. And it's been a journey, you know, it's been fun with my whole family, different, you know, the skills we've all learned on the process. And I've talked about some of the jobs have been done by other people, some of them have been done by us, depending on our skill set and time and energy. I think I've got one more slide. So dreams. This was an early photo of when we had a fan fitted on the front of the house, and it calculates how much energy is being lost through your home by sucking the air through it, if that makes any sense. Yeah. And they revealed to us that we had between the party wall, between us and the neighbours, there's a cavity between us and the neighbours. And at some point, one of my dreams is to fill that with insulation, partly sound insulation. Haven't discovered a method for doing that yet. But one window we still want to replace. Little things like, you know, how do I buy a sustainable doormat and a sustainable washing line? You know, I'm now on my second or third washing line. It's just like, can't we make something that was going to last, please? My husband wants to do more grey water harvesting, might build a boil hole. I'd like to insulate those bits of the roof a bit better maybe, but there's diminishing returns. So I think for now, my next step is to step up with a campaign called Just Stop Oil, asking the government to stop giving licenses for new oil. Yeah, that's where I'm at. Actually, I did offer to take any more questions at this point, so if anyone has any, then I'm open to questions.
There will be time for more questions at the end as well, so do save your questions till then.
Could I just ask?
Yeah.
You kind of whizzed over a slide that said something about water saving, and did you talk about? Do you have any measures for water saving? Do you do anything?
I think the main thing was the taps, low flush toilets. I think I did talk about it.
Have you fitted the low flow shower head system?
That
puts air in and reduces.
I had, and I can't remember what I've done now.
Some people like them, some people.
Yeah. I can't remember. I trust the man that fitted it, so if it was possible, he probably did it. That's my answer on that one. Great. Okay.
Thank you very much, Susie.
Thank you. Thank you, Susie.
Do stay with us for questions at the end. We'll get on to Samin and
Is that
Zoe.
Stephen Wywood with a question?
Oh.
I think he does have
Yes.
it. No, I think he's actually.
No.
Samin and
Okay.
Zoe.
Yeah.
Excellent. Zoe does have to leave later, so we'll get.
Oh, it's all right, not for
Not for a
another
while.
round an
All right,
hour, so
yeah.
no, I think we should be fine. Hopefully we're not for that.
Well, we can stand up then.
Yeah.
Which one?
9:30 I'm
There
scheduled
is
to
a
finish,
hand
so.
up there due to Staines.
Sure you should.
Right, so we'll need to, when we get to the video part,
Yeah.
then we'll need to share.
Can you share the whole thing?
Yeah, we'll share.
Otherwise
Oh,
it's
should we
spot
just share
between
the-
them.
okay.
Yeah.
It's just the only thing that I'm not sure what charge my phone's on now. I'm only on 9%.
Should we have a question from Gigi while we're waiting?
Yes.
Yes,
Hi, Judy.
hi. So I'm interested in the garden, but that kind of, I blinked and missed it. I must have been talking to my husband, but I didn't really see what you were doing in the garden.
Okay, sorry, Judy, I did decide to skimp on the garden because of time. So basically the garden we've done, we've got different heights of bushes and trees and things like that. We've got compost heaps. We've got a type of compost system called a hugel bed, where you put rotting sticks and wood at the bottom and then you build it up with compost on the top. Got a pond, so that's providing water in various water butts. One of the pond takes water off the roof of the building. The outside shed had a felt roof, and we took that off and replaced it with clear plastic, so it's now a growing zone. If we want it to be, it's also a shed. Yeah, there's 5 main features you need for a garden to be wildlife friendly, and I think we definitely got all of them, and I think I've described all of them.
Yes, could you perhaps write down the name of the compost system you're using, because I missed the name. My sound is not good, I'm afraid, so if you could just jot that in the chat, I'd be grateful.
Okay, well, we can join.
This is okay. This is this. I'm not sure the video.
Well, we can show the video if we just do it. I'll just try and turn mine back on. Yeah, but we can start and then we can. Okay, all right.
If you share,
But you should do it from there.
Yeah,
because-
because it's not. You have to stop in 5 minutes time. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm Zoe and this is Samin, my husband. So I can't see whether we're on the screen or not.
I think you're good.
Yeah, that's fine. Excellent. So we live in a Victorian terraced house in central Cambridge near the Beehive Centre, in that bit between Mill Road and the Beehive Centre. And so we've got our Victorian home with 21st century installation. So I'm going to tell you about that. So I'm going to talk first a bit about actually what we've done, and then Samin's going to talk about the more technical aspects, and then I'll talk about the kind of our conclusions at the end of our project. Okay, if we could go to the next slide. Excellent. Okay, so we moved into the house in February 2005 with a 1-year-old child, and we lived in a smaller house down the street earlier. And it's a beautiful house. It's one of the largest houses on the street, and we wanted to stay in Cambridge, but it was absolutely freezing. It's extremely damp, very cold, very, very drafty all the time. And yes, it did have double glazing. You can see on that there is some double glazing, but the double glazing wasn't working. It really had just all the seals had gone on the double glazing, even though it was quite new. And there's a beautiful feature that you can see at the back of the house, which is this glass roof, a bit like a partial conservatory, which is very beautiful, but again, completely freezing, and so it wasn't really, there was a lot of the house that wasn't really livable in, so certainly the loft is a nice loft conversion, but it was with a bathroom, but it was far too cold, and also our front room was very damp and we couldn't really use it. So we lived most of the time in this back room here, big large living room, probably a bit like yours, Susie, and we also had a wood burning stove, which, well, we still have, which we heated it with. I think I was just thinking I'm just trying to remember the next part with it. If you could move to the next slide. Yes. So so I say we moved in 2005, but it took us 10 years. We had another child, and then it took us a long time to actually get around to organising it. And over kind of starting in probably the early 2010s, we started going to Cambridge Carbon Footprint talks about eco-renovations. We started looking at super homes and at Cambridge Open Eco Homes and going around and visiting houses, and eventually we were brave enough to take the plunge. And so we contacted AC Architects, and they've had a lot of experience in eco-renovation. And so our project is very different from Susie's because it was completely project managed by the architects. And the idea was that we wanted to do a very big project, do it all at once, and turn our home into a very comfortable home, but at the same time reduce our carbon footprint. So it took really 2 years back and forth to actually get it done, and then we moved out of the house in June 2017. So if you can move to the next slide. Yeah, so you can see that the house there was a lot of destruction before there was any construction. So this is the back of the house, and the main reason that we had to move out was that there was a large reinforced concrete pad under the floor, and we decided we wanted to have floor insulation as well. And so after a while we didn't have any floor left in the house, and they dug it out to a depth of about probably about 1 metre. So there was no way we could have lived there. And also this is the back of the house, and you can see that there's no roof at all. But also we discovered various things, like there was the wall that was here had been supported entirely kind of just off the neighbour's house, so they had to rebuild the whole thing on there. And so it was all redone, but we'll talk a bit more about the concrete later on, but you can see that at the front of the house, there's some quite nice features which were uncovered. So there's this really nice archway in a historic passageway that went to the back of the house, but that then got covered up again. So we saw it briefly. Okay. So I don't think this is a slideshow, unfortunately, of our thing, but what we're trying to do afterwards is share it so people can look. Anyway, so this is the after. This is what it looked like in April 2018. So it's about 8 months later. The work is finished. You can see that the house is insulated on the outside. The roof is considerably higher, and we've now got solar panels on the front and the back, and our house is east-west facing. So initially we thought we wouldn't be able to get solar panels when we first moved in, but now the technology is so much better, east-west is completely fine. And it's great because in the morning, the ones on the back of the house generate electricity, in the afternoon, the ones on the front do. So we've got that. We've also got, so we've got loft insulation, we've got external insulation on the front and the back of the house, and some internal insulation on the sides of the house. And then we've got triple glazing throughout the house now, which means that it's extremely quiet, but also very warm and draft free. And you can see that the back of the house, the shape is still the same on this side, but now it's actually much warmer and you can actually stand there without freezing to death. Okay, so that is that bit. So I'll hand over to Samin now, who's going to talk through some of the technical.
Okay, so yeah, so we'll just go to the next slide. Okay. So insulation, basically what Suzie said, just insulate your house, okay? And it could be very simple to begin with. So most houses lose heat through the roof and through the windows. So insulate your roof. It's quite simple. If you don't use your loft, you can put insulation down. If you do, then you can put insulation into the roof itself. And that's what we did. The other thing is windows, and Zoe already mentioned, we went for hardwood, triple glazed windows. We also had new doors put in as well that were properly insulated doors. So, you know, so insulation, so I've got a couple of slides on insulation. So this is left and right is how the house was, and right is what the plan for the house was. Every blue, I'm not going to show, you know, I don't want you to, you can look at it if you want to, but basically every blue line on the right-hand side is where insulation went in. So on the bottom is the front of the house. So you can see there's external insulation on the walls. On the back, where there's no, where there isn't, there's blue insulation on the walls, on the external walls. And we're a terraced house, so there's houses on either side. And the party walls were insulated where it was necessary. But pretty much our house on the, you can see the red line here. So on the right hand, so for people at home, yeah, if you put the cursor there, there's a red line there, and that's internal insulation. So that was our kitchen, and that's a non-party wall. So party walls we didn't insulate, and that's a non-party wall because that part of our house goes behind the terrace, so that we had to insulate inside. And on the left-hand side, there's internal, quite thick insulation, because that is a non-party wall, but it wasn't as necessary because on the right-hand side is the kitchen. Yeah, so most of the external insulation is it's Kingspan, kind of 110 mil outside. The internal one is much more expensive, much thinner thermoblock kind of insulation. You can find, we can send links to this. I can give you all the data. So this is a picture of the external insulation coming out, being applied on the front. So we were a bit lucky in that we had what's it called, render on the front of the house. So there wasn't brick. So basically we had the render stripped out, and then there was some very poorly constructed brickwork, and then the builders basically put in holes for the insulation to go onto, and then we just put render on top. So it looks pretty much like it used to, except it's got this 110 mil insulation all in the front now. And you can also see here the kind of the new windows, and you can see the solar panels here as well. And we'll talk more about the solar panels in a bit. Yeah, so this is the internal insulation. So basically on the right-hand side of a house where the house becomes a non-party wall, all of that on the ground floor, on the first floor, and going up into the loft that was all taken out and internal insulation put in. So this is a picture of the, on the left-hand side is a picture of the internal insulation. You can't really see it. It's kind of maybe 40 mil of internal insulation. On the right-hand side is in our daughter's room. That's just like maybe 80 mil kind of external insulation type of insulation. It's internal, but it's quite thick. Yeah, next slide. We also had a problem with damp historically, just because I think, yeah, water was just coming up, damp was just coming up, and this damp proofing was put in. It's basically kind of a barrier, and it's put in where the damp was coming in, and it basically prevents the barrier, the damp from coming into the house. We had this put in several parts of the house that were kind of connected to the outside world. Roof insulation. Yeah, so this is, I won't talk too much about it, but basically I'll show you the next two slides are about the roof. But actually, let's just go back a bit. Basically again, the blue, sorry, next one, yeah. The blue is where the roof needed to be insulated. So this was all of the sides and the eaves. And the next slide now is about what happens in the roof itself. So on the left-hand side, you can see there's insulation between the rafters. And our architect on the right-hand side, you can see our architect was very excited about this because even though it's a terraced house, it's slightly set back from the houses on either side. And because of that, our roof lines don't meet up. So she said that, you know what we can do? We'll certainly put insulation between your rafters, but I can also give you a roof of insulation. So there's insulation between the rafters, and then there's 110 mil, probably, I think, or 120 mil insulation on top of the roof itself. And there you can really see this quite clearly there, where it's just laid up on top of the roof itself, and then the tiles went on top of that. So go to the next slide. Yeah, so roof, always think insulate the roof first, then external wall, then windows, then external walls. And really the last thing, we didn't have in mind that we would insulate the floor. But once it became clear that we had to move out and they had to basically destroy the kitchen because in order to put that internal insulation in, we thought, okay, well, we might as well at this point insulate the floor as well. And at the point I read a study, there was a study from, I think, King's College in London that said that, in fact, floor insulation had been underestimated. Actually, there was reasonable heat lost through the floor as well. So as we said, the plan was to dig a meter in. Turned out there was no insulation at all. There was no damp proofing or anything like that at all. So we had a proper job done. We laid a damp proof layer, we laid insulation, then there was screed, and the hot water pipes were put in the screed, and then our floorboards went back on as well.
Is that hot water pipe, is that a grid of hot water pipes?
Yes, it kind of squiggled through the ground floor.
We'll also talk about the fact that we had Victorian drainage, particularly in our downstairs bathroom, it always blocked, and so we took the opportunity as well then to have all of our drainage and all of our pipes completely replaced as well. Yes. So now you can flush the toilet.
So the floor originally was that floorboards with rafters?
Yes, actually, if you go back, yeah, you can see that. Yes, and if you remember the original pictures we had, there was floorboards throughout. The front room actually had the original ones, the Victorian ones, and then these ones on the left-hand side here, they must have been put in maybe 20, in the 90s, yeah, in the 90s, before, much before we came in. But basically, what the plan was that everything that we couldn't take with us, so the floorboards and the white goods, they were stored in the garden. So we moved out. We moved back in February, and we moved out in July, August. Yeah. So the summer and the winter, all these things were in the garden. They were kind of protected, and our kitchen was in the garden as well. Actually, it's only when they came to unwrap the kitchen that they realised it wasn't really possible to put it back because it all just dissolved. But they
It was very old, it was probably about
It's very
30
old,
years
yeah.
old anyway. the
Yes.
kitchen, so-
yeah. So these are the floorboards. They're being unwrapped and they're brought back in. And of course, because they had been out, they had absorbed moisture. So the wood burner literally burnt for, I don't know, 4 or 5 days.
I was going to say a couple of weeks.
Yeah, maybe more than that, maybe a week or so to dry the wood, and then the wood was placed back. Every panel had been marked, so it went back exactly where it was supposed to go. Yeah, so the PV system. So we have a sun power 4 kilowatt hour arrays, 6 in the front, 6 in the back. So a total of 4 kilowatt hours they can generate. And they maybe generate less than 2 in the morning, less than 2 in the afternoon. So they generate from the back in the morning and they generate from the front in the afternoon.
Can I ask? I don't know my facts on shading
Yeah.
of solar panels.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if, because of that, that's why you haven't got a wider array on the front.
I think that's what fitted, actually. We'd have to have doubled up otherwise. I think there probably is a shading, yes, but you're right, there probably is shading. From
Probably
there.
certainly in spring and autumn, I
Yeah.
think that's probably the case, yeah.
Yeah. In the back, they are also kind of in the center, but then in the back, there are windows, there are loft windows on either side, so there would be no space for that.
Yeah.
Yep, okay, let's go next, I think, yeah. So no, yeah, next slide. I think,
But
yeah.
you can also say about the heating system going directly onto the roof.
Yes, so the PV system is, yeah, we didn't realize it actually, but the PV system, it's quite nice. It goes flush. There's a tray, and the panels went on the tray, and then the roof tiles are put on. So it looks quite nice and flat. It's quite
And they're made
flat
from
and
like
flat.
a recycled slate.
The tiles are, yeah. Next slide. So heating. So we have a gas boiler still. So when we were thinking of doing this, we just said, okay, we'll just go with the gas boiler for now. And then because other alternatives weren't really, again, you make a decision at that point, and afterwards you think, oh, if I'd waited 2 years, I would have made a different decision. But like friends of ours who've got big, huge gardens, they have a ground source heat pump. We don't have, I think you need quite a lot of space to generate the amount you need. We would need, and kind of air source heat pumps weren't really a big thing then. Even now, I don't know what the kind of I think we'd have to replace the internal heating system to put one of those in. So anyway, so we went for a gas one.
You weren't placed to do it as you've got such great insulation though.
Yes, but it's a big thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it would be a big thing. In the center is our 2 meter tall, 200 mil, 200 liter mains pressured hot water tank. So that was, again, as we mentioned, part of the thing was to replace all these little things that had been just bodged and do a whole kind of proper job there. So we have hot water, pressurized hot water. This is quite a nice, I don't know if people have seen this before, bottom right-hand side. The thermostat is radio controlled. So you don't have to go around turning things on and off. They're all radio controlled. And there's a little panel to the top right there. There's a panel where you can kind of program. You can put your rooms into zones, and you can say which ones come on, which ones come off. So our loft ones, for instance, they're set at 12 degrees centigrade. They come on less during the day, 24 hours. Our room is set at a lower temperature than kind of our kids' rooms and things like that.
Our daughter sets her room at a higher temperature. She used to, so her room used to be where the old hot water tank was. And so she really liked it because it was nice and cozy, so she likes to turn it on.
But we can turn her off.
We can
So,
turn it
yeah. Yeah, okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So what happens with our PV panels is that when the sun is shining, the panels generate electricity, and then they're converted. So it's DC that's converted to AC. And if the house needs it, then it goes to the house first. So if the washing machine is running, so actually this is quite interesting because we used to go, you know, a long time ago when we had, you know, you had economy 7 and things like that, you know, we turned the washing machine on at night. But now we go, oh, it's going to be a sunny day, I'll turn the washing machine on right now, because then we can just use electricity from solar panels. So if the house needs it, then it goes to the house. I'll talk about the battery in a bit. What would have happened before, when we moved back in, if the house didn't need it, then it went into an immersion heater in our hot water tank. So the 2-meter tall tank that we have, at the bottom of it is an immersion heater, and the electricity would go there and it would heat the water basically the tank was acting like a battery. And actually Zoe will work this out, that actually we save quite a lot of money in heating, in gas. So gas from that. The battery comes in, so we didn't have a battery to begin with because they were very expensive. But last year, our electricity and gas supplier, and we get it from Bulb, who are also a renewable source of electricity, though they're in administration right now, so we'll see what happens with that. So anyway, last year they offered a trial battery, so they subsidized the battery, so it was kind of half price, and they said, do you want to try it out? So I said yes. So we got a 2 kilowatt-hour battery, and it's hooked up like this now. So if the house needs electricity, it goes to the house first. Otherwise, it charges the battery. Otherwise, it goes into a hot water tank. Otherwise, it goes out to the grid.
And something people may not know is the price that you'd be buying the electricity back from the board is much higher than the price that you'd be getting it.
That's correct, yeah.
Especially as prices are going up.
Yeah.
Has the increase in the electricity prices increased the feed-in tariffs?
No.
For new customers.
Yes. Yeah, so we get back, so we, you know, okay, last year we paid like 13, 15 pence per kilowatt hour, and we got back 3 pence. So there was no, so again, you know, your question was, what's the payback? We didn't do this for money. It's not for money, it's for our eco footprint and for the comfort. That's kind of a byproduct of the comfort that we have in our house.
And also, actually, we did a calculation as to size of battery we thought we needed, but actually the battery charges up really quickly, and we probably could easily have had a larger battery. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes. That's fine. So what happens to? Oh, we can't see. So our electricity and gas usage. So this is kind of just data from our just gas and electricity usage, and you can just see that, you know. It's just, it goes through a cycle because of the seasons. But basically, the battery came in kind of June 21, and if you compare June to previous June, then our electricity consumption and gas consumption has gone down a bit. Not that much, but there's a lot of other factors going on in there. So COVID happened, so we're all at home. Our children are much older, so they take much longer showers. They're either obsessed with being clean or not at all. So there's a lot of confounding factors in this data. But I think generally our usage of electricity and gas has gone down.
So this is just electricity from the mains.
Electricity from the mains, yeah.
Yeah, so particularly if you look at this line here, the blue, so June 2020, our electricity is here 100, but June 21, our electricity is half. So it's much less than that. Yes. Yeah. So, so people can see that.
Yeah.
But yes, as you can see, this winter, we've been using a lot of gas, which is the red line.
Yes. So, okay, so we go to the next slide. And then the other thing was interesting was, did the battery make a difference to exporting back to the grid? So this is the blue line. The blue bars are the money we got from exporting to the grid, and the red lines are the kilowatt hours we generated back into the grid. Back into the grid, yes. And so again, you can see basically when it's summer, first of all, because the bars are very high there. But even in winter, so if you look at January numbers, any January number. So even in the winter, we get back, you know, kind of £25. You know, it's not bad for a couple of months, winter. But again, it's not about money. It's just about, okay, we are kind of self-sufficient, you know, or at least we're less dependent upon kind of the electricity and gas coming in from outside. What effect did the battery have? Actually, that's quite interesting because so June 21 is kind of when we had the battery going, and I thought it would make a big difference to our export back into the grid. It didn't make that much of a difference. You know, if you look at July 21 then and July 2020, we're exporting slightly less, only slightly less. But as Zoe said, basically what happens in the summer is that the battery is fully charged by 11 o'clock in the morning. And if we had another battery, so you can line them up, you can, you know, kind of scale them out, you can connect one to another one. So if we had another battery, in the summer, we would be holding much more. We could probably hold double the amount and use that. But what's interesting is that you kind of work out, you know, you don't realize how much your kettle takes and how much, you know, you could charge the battery fully in the day and then turn the oven on in the evening and it's all. So devices we have use a lot of electricity, you know, quite intensely. And you kind of, you only that clicks in your mind when you see these things. Okay, next slide. Yeah, okay, so I think that's it for me. I think
conclusion, yes. So in conclusion, if you could come to the next slide. So first of all, we're going to talk a bit about what went wrong with the house. So there's kind of three major things that went wrong. So the first thing that went wrong, I alluded to at the beginning. So we knew that they were going to dig out the floor, but as soon as they started digging out the floor, they found that there was this massive reinforced concrete pad, which the surveys haven't brought up. So that took really a whole month of pneumatic drilling, during which point our neighbours moved out. Oh. We did offer to swap houses with them because we had our nice rental house far away from the noise, but there was a whole month, and the builders could only do it for a certain number of hours each day because it was just so noisy and so awful for them. So yes, we had to get rid of all of this, and that took a huge amount of effort. So that was a whole extra month then that we had to be in our rented house. So that was an issue, but it was overcome eventually. The second thing was that, so our windows came from a company called Valdi, and they made the bay window the wrong size. I think they made it so that the external measurements were the internal measurements or something like that. So they tried to fit the bay window when it arrived, and of course it didn't fit. So it had to go back to Poland, where they had their factory, and be remade, and then came back again. So for quite a long time, we'd actually moved back into the house, but we just had this blue sheet over, but we were okay because we were happy to be back in the house, so we were okay with that. We also had the scaffolding for a very, very long time because the insulation was delayed. First of all, they put the wrong insulation on the house, so you can see that there's this grey insulation that they're putting on here. And the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that when we were talking about insulation, the insulation was pink. And we didn't really know. We didn't know what the colour was going to be. And this is where the architects were really useful, because we had a meeting one day and Anne said, well, that's not K5, that's polystyrene, you know, and we wouldn't have known that it was the wrong insulation that they were putting on. And I think the reason they did that was because it was very difficult to get hold of the Kingspan K5, because that was the type of insulation that was on the Grenfell Tower. And so at that time, all the companies were denying really that they ever made that kind of insulation, and nobody wanted to sell it because it had such bad associations. But eventually we managed to get, because we needed 40 square meters or something like that. So we got ours on the back of another order, and then finally we got our insulation. But it meant that we had the scaffolding for much longer than we would have done, which then delayed our gas and electricity work with the new gas and electricity meters, which had to be moved outside. Because the gas and electricity people don't work under scaffolding. And so there was kind of various things that happened with that. So those are the things that went wrong, which did delay things a little bit there. But I think the next slide is what went right. If you want to move it to there. Yes, so this is me on the day that we moved back in. in February 2018, which was just when the beast from the east was here. I don't really remember that time. And it was amazing because it was absolutely freezing and it was snowing, but we were inside and it was just so warm. I mean, we'd never been so warm inside our house. It was really amazing. So to come back inside and it was really warm, and it's so quiet because of the triple glazing. It's just incredibly quiet in our house, which is brilliant. So yes, all our animals really enjoyed it, and the children did as well. And we can all have lots of hot showers now with our solar heated water. One of the best things about our the work that we've had done is this semi-vertical bike rack, which everyone talks about. It's the thing, you come past our house, you know, if you come out of the house to empty the bin or something, there's always somebody going past going, oh, where did you get that bike rack? Because this area here in front of the house is not big enough to have bicycles that way, and it's not big enough either that way. So we got this semi-vertical bike rack, which you've seen at stations and various things around, which means we can have 3 of our 4 bicycles like that up there, lined up there. So that was really brilliant. But that's the thing that what went right. So yes, it was amazing. You know, we could, instead of freezing to death and having to quickly light the fire as soon as we got home, you come into the house and it's just pleasantly warm, and that's, you know, what we wanted, which was amazing. So that's that. I think there's one more
question.
Oh, go on, yes.
The underfloor heating.
Yes.
You've got underfloor heating, and you've got I forgot the name of that, wood floorboards.
Yes.
I didn't know the 2 were compatible. I'd been led to believe they weren't.
Well, it's interesting because actually you can't really feel, you know, if you're walking barefoot. We've got in our hall, we've got tiles, and you could definitely really feel the underfloor heating there. The underfloor heating is working here, but it's not something you can feel with your feet. But it's putting heat in.
So I think there's several steps. So I think engineered wood is better for underfloor heating
because it's skinny.
Yes, because ours are really quite thick there.
But the other thing is that our heating is actually on all the time. So we set the house at 14 centigrade, 14 degrees, something like that, between 14 and 16. So it's on all the time. And in fact, because it's so well insulated, it probably is at 14 and 16 all the time. So it's heating all the time.
Yeah.
So what doesn't work with kind of thick wood, old wood, is you turn the heating on, then turn it off.
And then expect it to heat up, I suppose. Yeah.
It's very slow.
It's not long enough. The heating cycle is not long enough to heat the wood normally, but because we're basically heating throughout the day, at night, it works.
Mm.
And you definitely need that insulation underneath.
Yeah.
Yes, you definitely need the underneath.
Because you've got insulation over the floorboards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I think that's that's the last percent.
Sorry, is there insulation between the hot water pipes and the floorboards?
No, it's underneath the.
So
underneath.
So you have you have pipe work on an insulated bed, and then the floorboards above. The joisted floorboards above.
The screed. Yes.
The screed. The pipework is in the screed.
Right.
Which is a kind of broken concrete.
Yeah. I fitted them once.
Oh, right.
Many years ago, I
Yes.
spent a month fitting underfloor heating systems.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. That's, yes. Well, you know much about it, but yes, then us. So we wanted to just say thank you to Anne Cooper and Jake Wabransky at AC Architects, and so that's their website, and also everybody at RWD Builders who were brilliant. And the really good thing about our builders was that they had done eco work before, so they knew about how you shouldn't have any coal bridges and how the insulation had to meet, and they were really experienced in doing that and doing it properly. So that was a real boon for us, I think, that the builders really knew what to do. So yes, so that's it for us. So any questions?
Thank you very much, Zoe and Samin. That was a really fascinating talk. Before we do go into, if you could hold your questions just a few moments, I'd like to introduce Peter Griffin, who's sitting here as our technical host, also a member of Earthquakers, just to speak for a very few minutes about the company he works for, which is very relevant to this subject. Peter.
Hi everyone. Yeah, so I work for a company called Parity Projects that do
Do you repeat that? Parity.
Parity projects. Yeah, that's not actually an important word you need to remember, because our project for homeowners is called EcoFurb. So we do data analysis for housing associations on home energy and things. But our EcoFurb scheme is about kind of dealing with, I've been to lots of talks like this, and sometimes you come away being inspired but scared or intimidated and going, how on earth did they start? How on earth did you know to do that? Or feeling like, I don't want to move out of my house for several months. You know, there are some big asks. What EcoFurb tries to do is to introduce what you might do firstly with a survey on your house, and then following through to talk to you about what you might do now, what you might do later, and build a plan. And then if you want to go through with it, we look for the contractors and we find you people who know what they're doing. And we'll have that same person who's done the survey will come through the whole process. As I'm not here professionally, I should say, there are other schemes, there are other people, you know, they did it without the scheme. But you can go on our website, and one of the cool things that we have is, because we have data from local authorities in Cambridgeshire and in London, the area we cover, you can put your postcode in and there'll be some data on your house there already. So you can see some kind of models and see what would happen. It might be some things that aren't quite right, in which case you can tell us and you can amend them. But you can kind of get that feel for what are the options to reduce carbon or reduce bills. Anyway, I won't say any more, but I'll put details in the chat, and there are leaflets for live.
Thank you, Peter. Well, let's go into questions now then. Somebody had a question there on the screen.
Can we see that?
Yeah.
Oh yes, there we are. Gesh, is it Gesha? Gesha?
Yes, hi, it's Gesha. Thank you very much for two very interesting talks. I really enjoyed them both. I have one quick question. Did you say that internally you also use this very thin insulation? And if so, how did you find that one? Because I thought that one wasn't like, well, it has been around for a while, but it's not properly licensed because it doesn't achieve the U values it needs to achieve. It doesn't count towards the EPC rating. But I was just curious, how did you find that one?
So that was, I can answer that.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's called Thermoblock. It was recommended by our architects. It does have a lower U value, but it's still high enough to be worth putting in. So I think, you know, insulate externally where you can, and then internally where you need to, basically. EPC rating, I've got a whole rant about EPC ratings. Basically, after we had our house insulated like this, I said, oh, we're interested to find out the EPC rating. So somebody came around from, you know, quite a well-known company. The form they were filling in, and the questions they were asking me really made no sense at all. So for instance, they took a ruler out and measured the back of the house, and they measured from the fake slip bricks to the external render. And they said, oh, so you've got 20 mil of insulation. I said, no, because behind the fake slip bricks is 110 mil of insulation. And they said, oh, I can't write that down because all I can write down is this measurement of my ruler. And they said, oh, do you have a... They just asked questions that made no sense. So I wouldn't really trust an EPC rating. Basically, trust your instinct. If you're warmer inside, then your house is insulated.
Oh, I was going to add something as well. So for us, we had to, so in that particular part where you saw the stairs going up, that was going up to our loft. And actually that's a very, very narrow area. And we wouldn't have, that was the only insulation that would have fitted in order to get the stairs, because they took the stairs out, and to get the stairs back and to be able to walk past on the landing, that was the only thing that would fit. So it was a very, very narrow area for us as well, that particular part.
There's a question in the chat from Dan Perrett saying, how big is the battery physically, and how much did it cost?
How big is it physically? It's probably...
It's about 50 centimetres by 50 centimetres,
yeah.
Something like that. Yes, it's kind of
big suitcase sized. It sits outside in the garden, so it's just against a wall. It sits outside the garden. It's, you know, it's not in the way or anything like that at all.
In fact, it's on our neighbour's wall.
Yes.
Yes, it's not even on ours.
It cost, I think we paid £1,000 for it. And so it must have cost more than 2,000 because it was subsidised.
Can I just add something that I forgot to include? My journey through insulation, things that I really took on board were that if something feels cold, then it isn't well insulated. So like my water tank can be nearly 100 degrees inside, nearly boiling inside, and outside feels pretty kind of tepid. And that's because it's brilliantly insulated. And then you touch the pipes, you're like, oh, they're boiling, and there's just tiny bits of pipework that's exposed in our system. And also, if you can feel a draft coming in, then, you know, there's a draft coming in. Just go and hold your hand up around your house on a windy night, and you found they're the things that need insulation. And on our floors, I showed you, we had a cork floor and a laminate floor. You just put your hands on the two, and you're like, yeah, the laminate's freezing compared to the cork. Yeah, it's kind of obvious, but it took me a long time to learn that.
One thing you can do as well, we hired this, I think, because you had a picture of a thermal imaging camera. We got this from Cambridge Carbon Footprint, the charity. You can borrow the thermal imaging camera and take photos, thermal photos of your house, and then you can actually see where the cold parts are as well, which is quite fun. I took photos of our cats, children. Yes, it was quite fun. Yes.
Interestingly enough, it's as good doing it inside as it is outside.
Yes, exactly, because
you can see the cold bits.
Exactly, by the front door, you can see where the draft is coming, you know, or whatever at the front door. Yeah, because even our front door, and it's very well insulated, is still colder by the front door than it is elsewhere.
There's another question from Andrew Clark saying, how do you deal with ventilation? I guess you mentioned that, didn't you, Suzie? But on that second.
I think if I dealt with ventilation again, I would probably fit trickle vents on my windows. I didn't at the time. So occasionally we use a dehumidifier. I try to kind of get a thingy going, and I use mold remover. It's not perfect, but it's sort of good enough.
Yeah, we have trickle vents in the windows.
Is that enough, do you think?
I think it is. And we do have a habit of opening windows anyway.
We always see the window.
Yeah. Do you use closable trickles or permanent trickle?
No, you can open and close them. They're sliding ones.
What was if we answered the question? Can you repeat it?
It was just, how do you deal with ventilation? I think there's a big question generally, you know, of ventilation, and you asked if they have different approaches on kind of how far you have to go in terms of, you know, there's one school of thought that says complete airtightness and then add the ventilation that you need, and it's very against trickle vents.
So I think for us,
and there's a more pragmatic view that
so we are not airtight, for instance. And so I did, you know, during the planning of the project, I did say, what about mechanical, what is it? Heat, MHVR, no, MVHR, mechanical ventilation heat recovery. And our architect said, no, because you won't be so tight that you'll need something like that. We have been to one of the houses, the super homes we went to in Royston.
Yes.
They had MVHR, and you could see it was necessary for them because parts of their house were so tight that they needed to flush air through. So you could go that way if you are thinking that you don't have enough ventilation.
Any more questions?
Well, somebody's raised a hand. Dorothy has raised a hand.
Dorothy, what?
Yeah, Dorothy.
Dorothy Ball.
I just wanted to make a comment about batteries. About 18 months ago, we got an 8 kilowatt hour battery.
Oh, wow.
And it was £4,000, including fitting. And it's absolutely transformed the need to import electricity. because it's big enough to take you right through the night when you boil your kettles and when you do other things like that. So it strikes me, I mean, I might have even got a bigger one if I'd have known how good it was.
That's what I think as well, yes.
In terms of the size of it, I was going to think we'd need to put it in the garage, and the installer said, no, just put it in the understairs cupboard, and it really doesn't take up much space at all. You do need the battery, and then you need, what do you call it, where you change from AC to DC. You need an inverter as well, which I suppose doubles it up, but it was a lot smaller than I thought it would be.
Yeah. So there is an inefficiency in, for instance, the solar panels charging the battery, because it gets converted from DC to AC and then back. So there is some loss there. But even then, within a couple of hours, our battery's full.
Yeah, and actually, just to add something else, we've had an electric car for 3 years now, and with our solar panels and the battery, for 10 months in the year, we don't import electricity at all to charge the car or to run things in the house.
That's amazing, isn't it?
So, if you get the battery of a size to fit the panels you have, you can do really well.
Wow.
Thank you, Dorothy. Interesting.
I have a question for Susie, if nobody else does. You mentioned in your talk car sharing. I'd be interested to know how your car sharing works.
So at the moment our car sharing doesn't work because our friend's car broke, but it did work successfully for quite a lot of years, so I'm happy to talk about it. So the point that I would say it failed on was that she was a single, slightly older lady, and it was her car, and she didn't like the car seats being left in it for my children. And so she liked them to come out. So that was the weak point of it. And she lived like a couple of streets away. So I sometimes had to go and get the car, and the car seats were another juggle in the thing. I couldn't just walk around them. So that was one weak point. The things that worked really well in it is that we agreed things like we kept the car messier than her. So we kept the inside clean, and she cleaned the outside, just as a division of labour. We met up every, I can't remember how often, every 6 months probably, and we just kept a record of who'd driven how far. We then, so standing costs like having an MOT and road tax, we divided 50-50, and then usually turned out that we'd done about 66% of the miles. So we'd pay 66% of the petrol and 66% of the repairs and so on. And we kept the tank full, and she paid the standing costs on the car, so that when it came to calculations time, there was often not a lot of money to transfer between accounts.
How does insurance work?
It's really easy to put extra people on your insurance, so she just put us on her insurance, and then she kept her no claims bonus. We weren't developing one. Yeah. So for example, now I have a car, my brother's on the insurance as well, and my husband's on it, and it's all right, that's easy. Yeah. Oh, and we added business insurance because I'm a childminder, and that was just a bit of, an extra. And I think I paid the extra, say it was £30 a year to have business insurance, I paid that extra £30 for that part. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was essential that there was a feeling of trust and kindness between us. There wasn't a feeling that anyone was ever gonna, there was no one on the take. We all wanted it to be fair and equitable. Yeah.
There is also a car club in Cambridge.
Zip car or another one?
Enterprise, it's run by Philips.
They're not worth it because we calculated a couple of years ago when we bought our, we really needed a new car basically, and we worked it out that we made 2 regular journeys a week, and it wasn't worth it.
Yeah, but if you're making 2 regular journeys a week, we're in a sort of 3 or 4 journeys a year, and then it's when they really need a car. Or
Somebody like to share how the word spoke to them.
Oh, sorry, is that did you have a question, Mary?
It wasn't her, it was someone else, I think.
Don't know where that came from. We didn't quite hear what was said there.
Somebody's got a hand up there.
Yeah.
If you go to the
Okay, we'll go to Stephen, who has a question. If you're trying to speak, we'll try and take you.
I was with the how has the word of God fed you? And that line.
Okay, I'm just going to mute you, Mary, because it's coming across completely incomprehensibly. We'll come back to you if we need to. Sorry, Stephen.
Yeah, sorry, could I just ask a quick question to Dorothy, actually, to clarify the point about your battery? It sounded very impressive that you don't need to import electricity for 10 months a year. Just as a point of clarification, is your heating done separately from the electricity, so by gas or whatever?
You're muted, Dorothy.
We have 2 wood burners, and we do have gas central heating, but don't put it on much.
Okay, so you don't use electricity for
So
heating,
we're not
anyway.
using electricity. No, it's not for the heating, but
Okay, thank you.
It does do all the hot water.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Any more for any more, or is it time for home time?
I have one question about your garden and the long grass.
Yeah.
Do you grow wildflowers, and how do you do cut and remove or cut and drop?
We do guinea pigs these days.
Right, okay, you can raise it.
That's so modern.
They're actually slightly overgrazing it. Up till then, we had a really nice system where some areas of the lawn were kept quite short, and then the edges of the lawn were kept much longer, and they're on a kind of an annual cut. So everywhere gets cut once a year, and some of it gets cut fairly often. But so the wildflowers that were there, I think, are all volunteers, have arrived on their own, as far as I know. I think maybe sometimes my husband brings some seeds home, possibly, or a friend gives them some. But basically, they're volunteers. We've let what comes. Yeah. Does that answer that?
I'm just wondering, because if you're doing encouraging your husband probably knows this is better than I do. But if you're doing wildflowers into grass, would you cut in September and remove the grass to deplete the soil fertility?
Yeah.
Because
so it would go on the composting.
Because if
cuttings.
You don't deplete, then the grass, because of the C3, C4 chemistry. Okay, good. If you put, very simply, if you put fertiliser on wildflowers, they grow a bit and then plateau. If you put fertiliser on grass, it'll keep growing as long as you keep putting fertiliser on it. So it will outcompete the wildflowers. So you need to have basically a low fertility sward to get good wildflowers.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
And if anybody's ever down at Royston and Thurfield Heath, that is a very interesting place for wildflowers if you want to look. And the golf course is surprisingly good. Surprisingly, it has a very high it has a very high biodiversity, even though it's a golf course.
I think
they're normally deserts.
it's an amazing place if it's where I think of, yeah.
Yeah, but unlike most golf courses, which are sprayed and fertilised to produce, perfect green grass, this actually has quite a lot of. It has has a high Simpson index.
Could I just ask you about, you said at one point about that you didn't use economy 7 anymore. We've actually retained our economy 7. We have solar panels, and we do watch the weather for when we run the machines, but the dishwasher and the washing machine either run in the sunshine or they run overnight. But I just wondered whether that had been whether that's something you don't need anymore, whether you don't need to use electricity.
Oh, I think it's mainly because when we moved to bulb had a single tariff, so they didn't have the day-night thing.
Yes.
Yeah, but it does kind of, you know, you do have to think.
Yeah,
But
you
it's just another
have to
thing.
plan your washing.
You have to
and
plan.
things.
Yeah. There's more times where you can take advantage of various things.
Yes.
I think that.
Our supplier is Green Energy, which is one of the smaller green companies, but they do have the this night tariff.
Okay.
But they've got a very expensive tariff for the sort of peak time when people are coming home from work.
Yeah.
So if the sun's out, we always boil a kettle before that comes on and put it in the thermos flask and keep the thermos flask warm. And then we can use that later on.
It's very impressive.
But we don't have, so I mean, you saw a house where kind of, you know, on the street, we don't have space to park a car or anything like that. But you know, people who take electricity from Octopus, and Octopus prices vary. You could be on a scheme where prices vary every half an hour.
Wow.
And you can plug your car in, it can act as a battery. So there's lots of things you can do.
Yeah.
You have panels and electric car and things like that.
We're hoping to get a battery of some sort.
One thing
Thank you very much, Zoe.
should we bring things to a close and then because I feel like we might be having a general room chat. I don't know whether. We're losing some
I have to go to
anyway.
St. Giles to pick up our daughter from football practice.
Yeah, thank you.
Not on my bike.
Yes, well, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you everyone for attending, both a few here and quite a good number on the screen. And a final thank you to Susie and Samin and Zoe for their fantastic talks.
And Peter on tech and with this amazing scheme that I think sounds brilliant.
Yes, Peter and Daniel too has been helping us.
Oh, that's great.
So I hope you found it a useful evening and that it might spur somebody to
just insulate.
Thank you.